What was the strangest rule you had to respect at a friend's house? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. A good friend of mine went through a season where he didn't have running water at his house. So the rule in the house was that no one could come over unless they brought a couple gallons of water with them to pour into the toilet in the event that they had to poop. Story 2. Friend wasn't allowed in her room unless she was sleeping or changing her clothes. She wasn't allowed to shower for more than 10 minutes. Her brother was also locked out of his room and was forced to take cold showers, all so they wouldn't self-care. Story 3. We had to keep our hands above the covers when we went to sleep so they could make sure we weren't doing anything. I was 9, literally was the last time I spent the night there. Weirdos. Answer. Reminds me of dropping my daughter off to play at another girl's house. The mom told me she makes them keep the door open to ensure they don't talk about intimacy or experiment. They were 6. The mom later accused my kid of saying some weird stuff. I don't remember what it was, but it was hypersexualized and unlike anything she had ever said before or since. She's now 15. Needless to say, she didn't play over there again. Story 4. It wasn't really rule of the house, but my friend's parents were huge helicopter parents. Went to a concert with a friend, and we had to call, not text, her parents every hour to let them know we were okay. We were 21, 22, and I was close friends with the band we were seeing play. Story 5. No one was allowed to swim in the swimming pool because it was only for decoration. Other than that, they were normal parents. We were all in high school. There was no threat of anyone drowning. Story 6. Stayed at a friend's house one night, and the family communicated exclusively through whispering, not just hushed voices, but full-on hand-to-ear. Serious mind fudge. Story 7. No one was allowed to laugh at the dinner table or talk other than to ask, please pass the... No one was allowed to leave the table, even for a potty emergency, until the dad was done eating. Answer. Once ate at a friend's house, equally weird, but in different ways. The no leaving till dad was done rule stood, but the weirder part was the mom just stood there for 34 of the meal beside him. I was super confused until the eating biscuits she made said some jelly would be nice. And she immediately darted it for the fridge and brought back jelly. Only when he was nearly done with his plate did he tell her, go ahead and sit down, hun. And she did, and made herself a plate. Easily the most uncomfortable dinner imaginable. Beyond that, the conversations at the table was just strangely formal, considering it was a family dinner, like there were no actual family bonds. The dad straight up started a conversation with, so son, tell me, are you and me at table gonna see that new Monster Inc. film? I understand it is set in a university this time. And my friend, who normally was a bit more loosened up, responded, I have not seen a trailer, but the poster looks interesting. This was the interactions with all the siblings and him. It was a Fudge Twilight Zone episode, is what it was. Edit. To add to the weirdness of the family, their DVD collection was entirely composed of Mormon-produced films and some G-rated movies. The kitchen, dining room, living room, and foyer all had pictures of the Mormon First Presidency, Prophet and his 2 counselors, and right above the toilet was a picture of Christ just staring me down while I took a piss. All the kids were in bed by 8:00 p.m., and they only drank water or water with lemon slices floating around in it. As for the formality thing, at church, I remember the parents always talking about how kids needed to be treated as adults once they turn right. Once you turn 8 in the Mormon religion, you are deemed worthy to choose, maybe with a little bit of family pressure, to be baptized and formally become a member of the church. So I guess in a way they are, adults, but not quite. To go a bit deeper, Mormons believe before Earth was created, we were all living in heaven together, and we all came together with other people we liked and elected to be families together on Earth. So in a way, we're more acquaintances in heaven than those with a family bond. As such, I guess the parents figured at that point kids needed to be treated, to a degree, as adults rather than little kids. So family combos couldn't be any fun. The more I try to rationalize this, the more I dislike the parents. Story 8. I was around 8 when I went to a friend's place for a play date and asked for a cup of water. Friend's mom pulls out one of the biggest glasses 8-year-old me had seen and filled it to the brim. I was only used to the small plastic cups at this stage, so was not used to such a large amount of water. After drinking just over a 14 of the glass, I went to go pour it out because I didn't want the rest. I was full up. Friend stopped me and said that we weren't allowed to pour out water. We had to drink it. 8-year-old me thought that was weird, but looking back, sure, a good way to teach kids not to waste water, especially here in Australia where droughts are so common. So if I wasn't allowed to pour it out, what could I do with it? I thought I would just leave it for later. Friend once again stopped me and explained I wasn't allowed to leave it. I had to drink it all. I said I was thirsty anymore when her mom walked in, and told me that water wasn't allowed to be partied too hard in this house, and I better drink it all. Like right then, Anne's there. If you wanted water, you weren't allowed to leave it and come back later. You had to sit there and finish it. 8-year-old me tried to argue why I couldn't leave it for later, and the mom got pissed and had me sit at the kitchen bench stool and finish this massive glass. I sat there grumpily for ages trying to finish this thing so I could go back to playing. I remember getting really uncomfortable because I needed to pee, and sure enough, immediately afterwards I was dashing to the toilet. I get teaching kids not to just waste water, but let them leave it to come back later. It's water, it won't spoil, and they will drink it later. Story 9. When I was like 8 years old, I was playing at a friend's house in his room upstairs. Needed to go to the bathroom, so went for a pee in the toilet that was upstairs. His mom heard me from downstairs, living room, don't know how. She was probably eavesdrop or something. Was yelled at while peeing that this toilet was not for daytime peeing, nighttime only for some reason. So his mom yelled and demanded the 8-year-old me to stop mid-pee, run downstairs, and finish on the daytime toilet. Never was invited again. Still to this day, I don't have a clue what went on there and still have so many unanswered questions. Story 10. My friend's mom's boyfriend had one of those rooms we weren't allowed in for any reason. Problem was, it was the living room. It was impossible to get to the kitchen without going through that living room. Also couldn't reach the door to the backyard. So I never once entered the kitchen in that house. And any trips to the backyard meant walking out the front door and going through the gate on the side of the house. Answer, I bet he's the kind of jerk that can't sleep without the remote control clenched in his hand. And if he passes out on the sofa, the whole household has to stop until he wakes up. And the TV can only be on the channel he wants, even when he's not there. God forbid he turn on the TV and it's not on the same channel he was watching when he turned it off. Story 11. Being a young man, that I had to sit while peeing in their house, and the dad stayed in the bathroom to make sure. Weird. Story 12. Parents waking us up at like 7 a.m. to make us do chores. Had another friend whose parents were so strict that he often got grounded in the middle of play dates and sleepovers. His parents were wealthy, and he always had the cool toys and electronics, but he was constantly grounded from them. Answer, similar story. I went to a friend at the time's birthday party in middle school, and around 10 of us friends all slept over. Everything was normal the first day. Her mom woke us all up at 7:08 a.m. to do chores and had a list of who was assigned to what task, like cleaning their pool, doing dishes, or cleaning bathrooms. I'm all for making your own kids do chores, but this is just bizarre. Story 13. No one was allowed to poo in their house. If you needed a poo, you had to go to the grocery store, which was a 5-minute walk away. Story 14. As a single parent with 3 young children, I used to have a nanny come help out, and occasionally she would bring her son. One day, as I was picking up my children, the nanny's son farted, and she made him stand in the corner. He was only allowed to fart in the bathroom. He was 4. Answer. When I was a kid, if I needed to burp or fart during dinner, I had to wait for my parents to stop talking before I politely asked permission to, may I please be excused from the table, so I could leave the table, leave the room, and go into another room to fart or burp, all while holding it in because it was considered impolite to do such things at the table. Yell adult me don't care, and my parents have loosened up a lot on that now, except my dad still rolls his eyes and sighs at how uncouth we all are as we crack up laughing. Story 15. When I was around 8, we tried to be playmates with a boy down the street. His parents seemed nice enough to our faces, but were apparently very controlling behind the scenes. The Legos were the biggest standout that comes to mind after all these decades. He had the normal amount of Legos for kids our age, but they were kept in those organizers with a bunch of hard plastic drawers with dividers. Each type of brick had its own place in its own drawer, and each drawer was meticulously labeled with an old-school Dymo label maker. Different colors of bricks had their own organizers. He was deathly afraid to take any of them out of their drawers to actually play with them, because apparently even having too many out and assembled at one time would get him into pretty serious trouble. The friendship kind of sputtered out despite the propinquity. Story 16. I remember watching a movie at a friend's house with another person, so there were 3 of us sharing a bowl of popcorn. Before any of us went to eat the popcorn, my friend said it was a rule in their house that each person can only pick up one small, single piece of popcorn at a time. Would have to finish chewing it and wait to swallow it until picking up the next one individual piece of popcorn. Story 17. My friend's dad was a huge egomaniac and super controlling. He basically brainwashed his family into believing that he was a great genius, and so he was the king of the family. The big rule was that no one was allowed to open food unless he did it first. Like if a bag of chips was in the pantry, no one could eat any until he decided to open the bag. No one could take a slice of pizza until he did first. Everyone was expected to observe the rule, and they acted like it was perfectly normal. Story 18. My friend had a hall with light switches at each end. If you flipped one switch up to turn the light on, you could flip the other switch up to turn the light off again. It was entirely possible to get the light off with both switches in the up position. This drove my friend's wife nuts. So the rule was that you had to keep both switches down when the lights were off. Often this meant walking the length of the hall to flip a switch, followed by a return trip in the dark. Story 19. No coughing in the kitchen. It doesn't matter that the kitchen was huge, at least 2020, or if you covered your mouth. And this was 25 years before COVID. I learned the hard way one Thanksgiving. As an invited guest at my friend's house, I naturally entered the kitchen to ask if her mother needed any help. A sudden tickle hit the back of my throat and I coughed to clear it. Her mother gave me the look of passing, turned around, picked up the tray with the cooked turkey on it, and proceeded to throw it in the garbage. I was mortified. I ended up leaving shortly after. Story 20. Around age 5, friends' parents lost their cool when I did the peace, sign fingers in a photo. I still don't understand what's wrong with that, but they were irate and made us retake the picture. At her older brother's football game, it wasn't that serious. That family was very Southern Baptist. Maybe it's against their religion? No clue. Story 21. House rule. When eating dinner with their family, we weren't allowed to have a beverage of any kind, including water, with our meal. Had to wait until we were finished. Story 22. Nobody was allowed to watch any of the TV channels above 12 because the higher number channels were for filthy savages. That limited the house to 3 usable channels. Answer, so this isn't random. Channels 1 to 13 were VHF broadcast and 14 to 83 are UHF. Not to say you could have 83 channels of analog TV. You needed gaps between channels to prevent overlap of channels in a region. VHF channels go way back to the 30s, when tech improved and new frequencies could be used. The less coveted UHF range became available. As a result, all the more established channels tended to have the low channels, and all the new funky ones had the high channels. Story 23. After eating, we were forced to brush our teeth with his parents watching us. One time I refused, and then they grabbed the toothbrush and brushed my teeth very aggressively. It stung for 15 minutes after. If I go over now, I just know I am going to brush my teeth. Dislike going to his house, but my parents never let him come over. So I had to go over, and we would have sleepovers here and there. They would make us brush our teeth when after we eat breakfast, then after lunch, and then before we start to sleep. Story 24. Finally, an Ask Reddit for me. I grew up homeschooled up until my first year of high school. Let me tell you, I met a lot of really cool people with awesome families, but also a lot of really strange families. Homeschooling can be great until it's used for the wrong reasons, which in my experience is shockingly common. A list of weird rules I had to follow while over at different houses within homeschooling groups I was a part of. 1. No red nail polish. Her daughters couldn't paint their nails red or even wear the color red. If we were going to come over, we had to remove any red nail polish and wear non-intimacy colors. 2. Could not say, oh my gosh, because it sounded too much like, oh my God, and it's a sin to take God's name in vain. 3. We needed to cover our shoulders before her brothers, and especially her father, returned home. 4. Not a rule that I personally had to follow, but one family banned the use of Crest toothpaste. Their parents had something against the brand. I'm not sure when this TBH. 5. Was not allowed to be alone in the same rooms as friends, father. As an adult, I get why, but at the time I was like. 6. One family I knew wasn't allowed to listen to music that their father didn't like. Not because he didn't like it, because it was anti-Christian. He simply just didn't like the sound. They couldn't buy albums or download songs that he wouldn't listen to himself. They were able to listen to a lot of 80s stuff, which isn't a problem, but like, come on. 7. Could not address her parents as anything other than yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. That's all that I could immediately pull off the top of my head. It's been years, LMO. Story 25. When I was like 11 or 12, I slept over at one of my friends' houses. I had to go to bed at 8:30 on the dot, and her mom would walk in the bedroom every 15 minutes to make sure we were asleep and not talking. I didn't have a phone, so it wasn't like I could occupy myself. I told her mom that it is hard for me to fall asleep that early and asked if I could hang out outside of the room for a bit until I was tired. Nope, I had to go to bed at 8:30 because I was invited and therefore I need to follow their rules. I stopped having sleepovers there and started having them with another neighborhood girl because we had a lot more freedom. The other friend's mom got mad at me for staying over at another friend's house rather than her daughter's. Answer: I had a friend's mom who was like this. She invited me to a sleepover, and her mom made us go to bed by 8. Lights had to be off, and we weren't allowed to make noise. I only got there around 6. Then she woke us up at 4:30 in the morning to eat French toast. Her mom was upset when I said I wasn't hungry yet because I don't usually eat that early and was still tired. I was picked up by 6 a.m. My dad was definitely annoyed when I called so early, and I never slept over again. We were about 15. Story 26. When I was 8, I used to visit a friend that had a dog. I never actually got to meet the dog because when we came over, they would lock it up in a wood box. The dog never barked, and I couldn't see inside the box. All I ever saw was the extremely large dog poop. They had an old pool that was empty, except for pine needles, pine cones, and the dog poop that got swept into it. It smelled awful, but me and my friend used to play tag hide and seek around it. At one point, I stepped on one of the many piles of poop. My friend told me to take my shoes off and yelled for his mom. She came out, took my shoes, and put them in the trash bin. Then I was told it was the rules that if you stepped on dog poop, the shoes had to be thrown away instead of washing them off. As a kid, I remember being only slightly sad about the shoes, but playing tag with landmines was just another fun way to spice up the game. Eventually, I was told we were not allowed to play in the back anymore because the dog was getting upset, and she even boarded up the back porch so we couldn't sneak out there. I never stepped in poop again, but I also never saw or heard the dog. Story 27. I had to bring enough meat to feed the house in order to stay overnight. 3 kids, 3 adults, and myself. Story 28. At meals, wiping hands and face if needed on the tablecloth. No napkins. Same tablecloth the following night. Story 29. No touching, no handshakes, hugs, fist bumps, nothing. Whenever I was over at my friend's house, he couldn't touch me and I couldn't touch him, which was a strange feeling because of how physically affectionate we were at school. We even hugged each other after summer break was over. Story 30. No going inside until 6 p.m. Fun in the summer, deadly in the winter. Edit: we would play with their millions of goats or dogs. Story 31. Don't speak to or touch the brothers. It seemed really weird that I couldn't even say so much as a hi to them, but the parents just told me I couldn't. So I went over to their house when I was 11, and we had a pretty normal day until her twin brothers came down. The brothers gave off a weird vibe and kept trying to talk to me. Eventually, I caved in and said hello. My friend stared at me as if I was apt to get a lemonade or SMT, as if, since all I did was say hi, that SMT bad would happen. The boys then started to comment on my body. I'm a girl, buddy, and was an early bloomer, and they were in 9th grade. I thought this was weird, but didn't know what to say, so I just chuckled and asked my friend if she wanted to watch TV in the other room. She said yes, and we left. One of the brothers asked if he could see me in the other room. I was a little kid and didn't really know how to say no, so I said yes. He started to caress my cheek and told me about how he had been waiting to meet me. Luckily, my friend said she got the movie on, so I left. The brothers went upstairs. When my mom came to pick me up, the boys came downstairs to say goodbye, and this MF winks at me before I leave. I later found out that apparently she had been talking to me at home to her brothers and stuff, and one of them said very odd things, and when she showed him a pic of me, he got very inappropriate and was very excited I was coming over. Needless to say, I never went to their house again. Answer: so wait, the parents totally knew their son was acting like a creep. They knew you were their prey, I don't find any other word. And when you came over, they told you to stay away instead of their kid. He was so uneducated that he could have assaulted you without the help from your friend, and nobody stopped him or told him it was completely inappropriate to say the least. Way the actual fudge. Story 32. Everyone mentioning rules at their childhood friend's house. This one is my grown-up friend. Can't drink adult beverage until the kids are in bed. Okay, I sort of get that, except for the reasoning. The adults in the house, usually my friend, her hubby, I, are in charge of making sure the kids are looked after and are safe, so no booze allowed while they're awake, not even a sip of wine with dinner. 3 of their 4 kids have special needs, so just in case someone needs to go to hospital or something, there are sober adults who can take them as well as supervise the others, until after the kids have gone to bed. Once they're asleep, then the adults can get absolutely blind tipsy, presumably because no incidents will occur after they go to bed, like there's 0 chance of a kid suddenly going downhill or whatever and needing medical attention. Add that to the fact that one of the kids is a literal insomniac. He has gone for 48 hours without sleep many times due to his medical conditions and the substances he is prescribed to deal with said conditions. Plus, the younger 2 will get out of bed whenever they please to join the adults. There have been many times where it's after midnight and we are enjoying cocktails and Cards Against Humanity, and the littlest kid will wake up, get out of bed, and the parents will just shrug and say, "Oh, she's up now." She can stay out here with us because she will wake the others if we put her back. She doesn't want to miss any of the fun, and they'll continue drinking. So no adult beverage before the kids go to sleep because they don't want them exposed. But if they wake up in the middle of the night, then it's fine. Plus no adult beverage so everyone can be sober to supervise the kids. Unless the kids are asleep, because if they suddenly need a hospital, then we are allowed to be as intoxicated as ever. I don't understand it, but I also don't understand the bit about if hubby is away and I am visiting, my friend has to ring him to let him know the kids are asleep and ask if it's okay if she has a drink with me while he's away. She must get permission from him because of the whole someone needs to be sober to supervise rule, even though when he's home, they can both get smashed with no problem. I also don't understand why she's married to a controlling prick in the first place, but that's a whole different story. Story 33. This is pretty tame compared to others here, but I had a friend once in the 8th grade. His dad would work out of town for upwards of a month or even more at a time, then be back for a week, maybe 2. When he was gone, that guy's house was the place to be. Could do just about anything we could imagine as long as no damage occurred. When his dad was around, though, things changed. He would pretty much never invite anybody over, and if he did, there was a very active effort to ensure we never landed in the same room as his dad for more than a minute or 2. Story 34. My rich friend had a living room all white, roped off with a red satin rope. Nobody was allowed in except for Xmas. Answer. I've heard it called the sitting room, among others. It's where important decisions were made. Dad's business friends come over. Important people were entertained. And special events, like the Pope visiting or Jesus playing guitar. Everything is kept pristine like a museum. And the crazy ones keep the furniture covered in plastic so no dust gets on it. Gotta keep it fancy. Story 35. No sitting in the living room. All the furniture was covered in plastic. The living room was considered for show only. Answer. That's a very old-fashioned approach that I still remember from growing up in rural Bavaria. The good room was only for high-ranking guests and holidays, or for celebrations like a wedding or baptism. Otherwise, it was locked and only carefully dusted. But when the pastor came visiting, the good room was opened, aired, the good tea service was put on. Everything had to be perfect. At any other time, the family would just meet in the kitchen, which was more of a living room than what we would call a living room now. Story 36. 1. Nobody is really allowed to eat unless it's a sit-down meal time. 2. Don't say anything when the police officer yells at and hits his wife at the birthday party. Stay on his good side and don't mention how it is weird he's sitting in the back of the dark living room watching all the girls watch a movie together on the floor. 3. Make sure to lock the bedroom door when you enter the bedroom and when you leave the bedroom. Only daughter, big family. These were 3 different friends. Story 37. If I slept over, I had to go to church with them in the morning. I guess part of the agreement was that the trade-off was going to church. Going home wasn't an option, or I couldn't sleep over. My mother went to the same church. It wasn't a conversion thing. Story 38. Not eliminate animals in Minecraft. We used to go my friend's house to play Minecraft on our iPads. His parents didn't allow eliminate animals in Minecraft, so we had to always farm wheat. Story 39. My friend had a window unit air conditioner that he wasn't allowed to turn on, so the whole house was unbearably hot. South Texas. No food in the fridge, just tons of homemade paper being processed. He mentioned his mom had mental problems. Story 40. Don't lean on or touch those pillows, please. My sister-in-law's fancy pillows on a couch I was sitting on. Story 41. Eating a sandwich separately. Friend's dad was absolutely fudge nuts. He made us eat the bread, then the meat, then the cheese, and then bread again. It was so fudge weird. We also weren't allowed to drink anything without drinking 2 full glasses of water. Story 42. Super Christian family had a Puritan thing about anything that was pleasurable, so they weren't allowed to listen to music except worship stuff. And the wildest they ever got was when they were allowed to have like a single chocolate-covered pretzel at the end of dinner once. Story 43. This was actually my house growing up as a teen. My friends would spend the night at my house. My parents would tell us to be quiet. Even if the TV was somewhat loud, they would come out screaming at us to shut up. My parents were not good hosts. My parents would tell me and my friends to find food, and it was not a restaurant. I was about 15. My best friend's mom was a single mom, and she worked late hours and was rarely home. I would spend all weekend there. His mom would order us pizzas and sodas. When I had kids, I made sure I let them have big parties and sleepovers. I don't care if I miss out on sleep for my 9-year-olds. Story 44. One time I visited a friend of a friend's house, and we absolutely were not allowed to talk, look at his wife. I mean, like not even saying thank you when she passed out drinks for everyone. It was extremely awkward. Thankfully, I heard they are not together anymore. Story 45. middle school best friend, good Catholic family. Mother and daughter slaved in the kitchen, while father and son sat at the table and waited for service. Father and son got served first, and only when they started eating were mother and daughter and me allowed to get food as well. Weird when it happened, culty af in hindsight. Answer: that is pretty much the reality of my culture. The only way that you will have a higher status than a man is if you are his mother or any other aunt and grandma. It used to annoy me so much when my great-grandmother used to tell me to put food on a plate for my younger brother because he can't do it himself. He was 11, 12. P.S. Not Christian. I am a Kenyan Somali Muslim, but reflects on a lot of cultures. Story 46. Couldn't use the bathroom at this weird kid's house for no reason other than we couldn't use the bathroom just because. Story 47. Childhood friend, take shoes off outside, put them in plastic bag, walk inside the garage, close garage door, and use exterior bathroom door to go in, take a shower, put your clothes in another bag, and then wear clothes provided to you. Oh, and plastic on everything. Chairs, sofas, beds, everywhere. Answer: this family experienced bed bugs when they started coming back around 2003. I guarantee it, but hey, I really can't. That's just what it sounds like. It's crazy to think they just weren't a thing. Basically eradicated them 100 in the 50s. Spent over $3,000 when they showed up at my house. Threw away everything. Furniture, beds, appliances. Stupid me. Then I learned about heat treatment. One treatment ant, they were gone. Just totally gone. As well as ants, carpet beetles, unknown mice that got stanky a few days later. Also, my house was built in 1909. The wood smell was fantastic after the heat. They brought the entire house to 145 degrees for 3 hours. The concrete basement was hot for 3 days. Only issue was some forgotten candles. Story 48. In middle school, my friend's mom would ground my friend while I was visiting. Like she would confront him about something he did in front of me, scold him about it, and then make him sit in the corner or take away the TV. And many times I would just have to sit there too, waiting for his timeout to be over. It was so embarrassing. Even then I was like, don't do that shoot in front of your kids' friends. Deal with that stuff privately. Story 49. No whistling. Was over at the neighbor's house cutting wood with him and his dad when I started to whistle, and the dad snapped and looked at me like I just eliminate the family dog. Then said, we don't whistle here, with the most serious face I've ever seen. I never went back. Story 50. Went to my friend's house when I was on my period, and in the middle of a conversation I mentioned I was on my period and was asked to leave immediately because, to quote her mom, I was unhygienic, and also found out that when my friend is on her period, she has her own set of cutlery and is only allowed to sit in her room. Story 51. I went round my new friend's house for dinner one night, and then the plan was to go and see Return of the King at the cinema. Ate food, chatting to him and his family. Everything was normal. Then the time came to go to the cinema, and his family said to me, would you mind taking Gandalf? What? Turns out they had a 6-foot cardboard cutout of Gandalf upstairs, and they had taken him to the first 2 LOTR movies, and it had become a tradition. So I go upstairs, find the massive cardboard cutout, struggle to drag him down the stairs. At this point, the family are in the car waiting for me. I mutter to myself, thinking, how the hell is this going to fit in the car? I drag Gandalf to the car and open the door, and they're all laughing their jerk off at me. There was no tradition. They were just teasing me. Story 52. I had a friend who was not allowed to close her bedroom door for any reason, not even to change clothes. I ended up changing in the bathroom when my mom made me stay over. And yes, he was a perv. Found out when my friend was 18 that he had been RPIing her and her older sister for years, pretty much since they entered puberty. Retired cop who knew everyone in the local precinct, so she could not report him. Story 53. At a friend's house, we had to ask permission to get a drink of water. This included my friend. It was just a house rule that you couldn't even drink without permission. Story 54. Reading all of these parents with freaky rules just confirms that when I have kids, I want them and their friends to feel comfortable coming to our house to hang out whenever they want, in a space they can be themselves in. Answer: same. Luckily I have kids and seem to already be doing good. My oldest will be 8 this year, and it's not uncommon to walk out to my living room and see one of her friends there without her, just hanging out. And they go, oh, she went to play outside with our other friend. I didn't want to go. They all seem comfortable enough to just be in my house without her even there. Story 55. Very Greek family, lovely people, amazing meal. Donner was over and I got nearly yelled at for picking up my own plate. Daughter and mom did it. Not me, I was a guest. It was odd. Story 56. The toilet lid not just the seat, must be down at all times unless being used or the cat will sleep in the toilet water. Nothing like sitting down to crap and accidentally crapping on the cat. The horror stories of chasing toilet cat around the house and the mess he caused were pretty funny. Sounds like a crap time though? Cool cat otherwise, friendly, talky, and cuddly. Story 57. I remember in high school, one of my friends had a no phone and door stays open rule, meaning I had to give my phone to her parents, and we couldn't hang out unless the door to the room we were in was open. Answer, my mom had the open door rule too. It was very frustrating, and it got to the point that she either threatened to or actually took our doors off. I suppress a lot of memories from my younger years. I want to say she actually removed the door completely, but I can't say so with 100% certainty. We also were not allowed soda, AC, we lived in Central Texas, sugar, or anything with red dye in it. There were a million little rules that were never verbally expressed, but we'd learn the hard way. We had to constantly clean. It got to a point I would pretend there was flour scattered across the floor when I swept, so I would be extra thorough even if the floor was already clean. Oh, and kids were seen, not heard, regardless of age. Needless to say, I've gone no contact with her. She's not allowed near my kids. Story 58. When I was about 9 to 10, I asked my friend to ask their mom if I can go to their house for a play date. My mom didn't care what I did as long as I didn't bother with her. We went to the kitchen for a snack and we ate some chips and dip. This friend was my mom's best friend's son. We wanted to pet their cat, so we went over to their cat's bed where it was playing with its toys. We were just playing with the cat when he heard his mom come down the stairs. He dragged me away from the cat, and we acted like we were just playing on our phones. When I asked him why he did that, he said, the guests aren't allowed to pet the cat without mom's permission. And I asked him why, but he just said, if somebody's allergic to cats but don't know, then she doesn't want to have to help them. After that experience, I got really sick and broke out everywhere, and I found out I'm allergic to cats years ago. Story 59. I haven't had to respect many strange rules, but I was probably the house with the strange rule. Had to tell people under no circumstances to open the front door without asking first. This is because we had a guinea pig that free roamed the house. We kept her cage on the floor so she could access it, and that's where she did her business and ate, but otherwise she wandered free during the day. You had to ask to open the door because the guinea pig kind of matched the carpet, and while anyone in the family could spot her, guests had a hard time seeing her, and we didn't want her running out, even though she probably never would have. She knew where she got her grits. Story 60. Shut up was a bad word, and my friend's older brother called me out to their parents at the dinner table for saying shut up when we were all playing basketball earlier in the day. Parents, hey older bro, how was your day? Older bro, good, except what kind of hotel kept saying shut up to me all day? Story 61. We had to poop at a certain time in the morning. My friends could do it, no problem. They were used to it. I still till this day have no clue how you can shoot on demand. Story 62. No going in the garage ever. Never questioned it because I wanted to be respectful of my friend's parents. Finally asked a few years later about it, and it was because his dad was restoring a 1950s Studebaker car, and he didn't want anyone touching it and potentially wrecking anything. Story 63. Sabbath with a non-Jewish family. All lights and electronics off at sundown on Friday. Edit, not electrons. Answer. I find this observance and other religious customs that are somewhat arbitrary, but that people follow super closely to be absolutely fascinating. I was working in an Israeli hostel in Buenos Aires years ago, and some guy started banging on the door from the street, 2 stories down. There was an intercom, so I ignored it for a while. Ultimately, I had to go down and see what was up. I opened the door, and it's a super Orthodox Jewish guy. I couldn't say what sect. This is all in Spanish, but he says, "Are you Jewish?" I very apologetically tell him, "No, sorry, I am not." He gets pumped. "Oh, perfect. My family and I are trying to have dinner. Could you come next door for a moment and help me turn on some lights?" It was Saturday. I told Einov to watch the bar, and I went next door. He pointed at a few light switches, and I helped them out. They were super nice and appreciative of the help. Very low effort, high payoff for my ego. But really, it's such a little thing. And it would be so easy for them to kind of look the other way and flip a switch or two, but they're so devoted to it, and it's so important. My cold atheist heart finds it really confusingly touching and genuine. I guess there's a term for me here. It's something like Saturday Goy, something like that. I don't mind. Least we can do for a neighbor, I guess. Story 64. Not a strange rule, but a fucking concerning reaction. I was like 7 or 8, and I had dinner at a friend's house. When people would put their elbows on the table, his dad would poke them with his fork. Fudge. Weird. Story 65. No pointing finger guns at each other, especially girls. We don't encourage violence in this household, just sexism. Story 66. One family I taught violin lessons to required their kids to poop 3 times a day because that was healthy. I have no idea how they made that happen. But my student told me one time, I still think about that. From time to time, they moved to Idaho a bit later to live off the land and farm and stuff. They were homeschoolers. Had another friend as a teen who had a 10:30 p.m. curfew. Until she moved out of the house, it was non-negotiable always. Except for school dances, it was 11 p.m. Story 67. If it's yellow, let it mellow. It's not really strange, but it's disgusting. And I dreaded going pee first thing in the morning when I stayed the night. Story 68. I think this was around grade 1 through 4. I'm not sure, but I used to visit a classmate's house all the time because she had cool things, a Nintendo console, pool, swings, a hamster, etc. And my parents worked all day, so anyway, she and her younger sister weren't allowed to use a fork and knife because their mom thought it was dangerous. They were only allowed spoons. I always thought it was weird since my parents taught me from a young age to use cutlery in cutting up my own food. Story 69. My partner's dad is convinced he can't have regular filtered water from the Brita. It has to be bottled distilled water, put through the Brita. I made the mistake of filling the filter with tap water, and he went off on me about how he couldn't use the pitcher now. Story 70. There were whole rooms in the house where children were not allowed, like living rooms. My friend was wealthy, so the house was huge. But even he and his sister were not allowed in those rooms. I couldn't imagine living somewhere and not being allowed in places. Story 71. My ex-girlfriend's parents would not put food in the garage bag in their trash can. If you had food that needed to be thrown away, you put it in a bag and put the bag in the garbage bag. Every single piece of food had to be double bagged, individually. It was such a waste of plastic. Answer: that sounds so extreme, but I know of people who do bag up food to put into the already bagged bin to stop pests or smells from, especially if you live in the tropics where food spoils and goes so moldy so quickly. But not every single item in its own bag, Jeebus. That is beyond overkill. I just put the food in the freezer until it's bin collection day. Story 72. Speak your mind. Both homes I grew up in would beat me for, among other things, telling my opinion if it was different than their expectation. Story 73. Friend's mom loved the crisp lines the vacuum gave the carpet in the living room, and thus forbid anyone from walking in there in fear it would ruin it. Story 74. We had to add vitamin C powder to anything we drank, primarily juice. For years, every time I spent the night at my buddy's house, I would get the trots runs and never could figure out why. Then one day I'm at the kitchen as my friend is fixing drinks and his mom reminded him to put in a couple scoops of vitamin C. I just drank water after that. Story 75. My friend had a rule that whatever she ate, you ate as well. Even went out to dinner with her family who offered to pay for me. She said, don't worry, just get 2 of whatever I'm having. One time she got mad at me and knew I dislike Munster cheese. So she made us eat Munster cheese and bologna sandwiches for 3 days at her house. Story 76. When we were kids, my brother and I were playing the new Super Mario Bros. 3 at a friend's house. The friend declared that if you didn't catch the wand that drops after beating the castle boss and let it hit the ground, he would kick you out. My brother didn't believe him and let the wand hit the ground and bounce. My friend made him leave immediately, LOL. Me and my brother still joke about it to this day. Story 77. My babysitter wouldn't let me, my BFF at the time, play anything paranormal themed because it was demonic and Jehovah disliked that stuff. We were Jehovah's Witnesses. I wasn't allowed to talk about some shows I liked either if they happened to be Christmas episodes. I remember being reprimanded once for talking about it. Story 78. My friend was the scapegoat of her family, especially her mom and big sisters. I already felt it when I came to her home. Her mom rang a bell when dinner was ready. She gave a sit and a napkin ring to each person, and you couldn't change or even forget which ring you had, or else she would be very angry at you and instantly dislike you. We couldn't talk while eating dinner. I mean, when strangers came, we could, but she didn't like it. If adults were talking in the living room, you couldn't interrupt them if you weren't considered as an adult. My friend is 22. She's still not an adult for them while her sisters were at 18. She fudged up my friend. Now she has terrible anxiety, and I have to be perfect. My parents will maybe love me if I'm a full-time student with 2 jobs, a horse, and a nice boyfriend who succeeds in everything he does. I honestly wish bad things to her mom. Story 79. Probably not too strange, but my buddy's wife gets super bothered by slightly audible, repetitive noises, so I couldn't bring any food to his place since my chewing it would be a problem. Story 80. My ex-boyfriend's stepmom had looking pillows on the couch, exactly what it sounds like. God forbid he fell asleep on that couch and his peasant head was on the looking pillows. Story 81. I went from NZ to the UK and stayed with my mom's cousin for a few days. She called me down for dinner and I sat at the table. She told me to sit in another seat because the kids have assigned seats. Her kids are 15, 17, and 21. One night, I went into London proper using the public transport to go see one of my friends and stay at theirs the night. My mom's cousin rang my mom and to make sure it was okay for me to use public transport and stay the night at a friend's. My mom politely told her that I'm 22 and hadn't lived at home for the last 2 years and that I'm an independent person. Story 82. At a friend's house, during evening meals, their dad always had first crack at the food on the table. The mom and kids just sat blankly as dad filled his plate with all the best bits of food. Once he was ready, he kind of nodded and the mom kids would go next. Egg. I remember having roast chicken there and the dad literally took both legs and both crunchy wings. At first, I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. The bizarre part was how normal it was for them. Story 83. To take his dog to go potty a few times a day while the parents were out of town, which they were often. Thing is, this Chihuahua had a litter box, immaculately clean, and after each potty, the dog expected it cleaned right away or he'd stare you down. I ended up becoming close with him. I miss you, Tiny. Coolest, most spoiled little dog, but I loved it. He'd sleep on me, and if I woke up and forgot and moved, he'd bite at me till I gave up and just held my piss till he was ready to wake up. But he'd be super snuggled up on top of my chest. That dog got anything he wanted from me. We ate all the cheeses you could imagine, would get those party platters with meats. He loved a cap full of Mickey's malt liquor when we'd partake. But yeah, the litter box thing was fucking strange. Never in my life have I met another dog that used one. And they had a huge backyard. Story 84. I would get frowned upon for cutting the fat off mutton at a mate's place around 12:15. Got invited to stay with a family while traveling through Turkey late 90s. Needless to say, a whole lot of mutton and goat meat. I don't mind a leg of lamb here and there, but mutton is a whole other ballgame. Would be happy to not eat it ever again. Story 85. A coworker told me that whenever she has late-night company over, she makes them give up their phones to her, in which she puts it into a lockbox until they leave. I want to ask why, but don't want to come off as if I'm interested. Story 86. If you want to laugh, read this whole comment. Normally I would put a TLDR, but I feel like this story needs to be read in its entirety in one go, and I don't want to spoil the crazy. One of the many very crazy rules, but perhaps my favorite rule, was no sighing and/or deep breaths unless outside, and he would enforce this by throwing a shoe made out of coarse fiber, like what some doormats are made of, but in shoe form, which he would sometimes wear barefoot like the absolute menace he was, at us, and the shoe had a bunch with metal studs, kind of like metal pyramid-shaped spikes, sort of like what you'd expect to find on some like goth clothes or bracelet, but had a bit more of a sharper point, so were a bit sharper than normal, but thankfully weren't too sharp, riveted to it, and he would throw it at us as hard as he could, fully intending to hit us. And he had uncanny aim and very rarely missed, LOL. Now, the earlier part is funny enough until you learn the reason he had that rule and enforced it so strictly. So here's the real crazy that should give you a good laugh. His dad, who was a massive conspiracy nut, wholeheartedly believed the schools had machines in them that emitted toxic chemicals in an odorless reach into the air for the students to breathe in, but they only affected adults that weren't vaccinated against them, i.e. school staff and anyone in on it. And the gas these machines created bonded to the tissue off the kids' lungs for a few hours, and then after those few hours, as they took deep breaths, the gas would detach off the lung tissue and be expelled into the air of the family's homes or out in public places, so that when they got home, they would be soaking their parents in this mind control gas, who would in turn breathe in this gas and then have it bond to their lung tissue and have it travel up to their brain via the bloodstream, and it would somehow pass the blood-brain barrier and cause them to fall under the control of the secret government, not the Illuminati. No, according to him, only fools believed the Illuminati were real. That's because the secret government created that myth to distract from the real, even shadier secret government that was working as, and I'm paraphrasing a little here too, a condensed multiple rants in B to make it fit within the context of a comment format. But I quote, the equivalent to the CIA for an interdimensional worldsmith trying to build a bridge between here and his dimension so he can march his people. He would use finger quotations when he said his people every time through the portal so that they can harvest all of the world's positive and happy energy. But this being had two problems in his way. One, he needed a bigger workforce than what we currently had when he first started. And two, once we finally had enough adults to complete the project, they needed all the adults in our world to be brainwashed in order for him to communicate all of the instructions for building the portal on our side. And that's why over the past 300 years, there's been a steady push from the Earth governments to educate every child so they can inhale this gas and then expose their parents to it, and why we have had such a massive increase in our population. Because this real secret government has been slowly eroding our morals so that intimacy is treated like a game, and we are careless with how many kids we have. And he believed that if we didn't breathe deeply, then the gas couldn't escape our lungs, and thus we weren't allowed to breathe deeply, 1 second in, 2 seconds out, unless we were outside and at least 12 yards away from the house. It's worth mentioning they had a massive yard, like 5 or 6 acres, so 12 yards away was nothing. This guy was crazy as all get out, but ultimately pretty harmless. And their house was certainly better than my home, where my extremely abusive father and also even more abusive older brother lived. So I actually genuinely preferred their house, as their entire family treated me like one of their own. So some of my best childhood memories are when my 2 best friends and I, they were brothers, got their dad riled up and ranting about his various conspiracy theories and whatnot. And that was the only place I actually got to be a kid. So in truth, I kind of loved it over there. Story 87. Not so strange, but sad. I had gone to a friend's house for a sleepover about 10 years old. I didn't eat much for dinner, so I asked if we could go down to the kitchen and get something to tide me over. My friend seemed really nervous about it because she wasn't really supposed to go down to the kitchen after dinner. I didn't understand why until I realized it was because her mom would sit and drink vodka by herself on the couch watching TV and absolutely scream at any kids who got near her. Story 88. Not a friend, but I had a customer that wouldn't let anyone in his house without giving them a short speech about how much of an anal prick he was. He said something like, "I am going to need you to listen very carefully, as I'm going to give you very specific instructions and expectations for you when you are in my home," in response to me saying hi. We had to use brand new cloth tarps. He had to see us open them out of the package, take off our boots, and then wear 2 pairs of brand new unused shoe protectors over our socks and only walk on the tarps. This dude even looked at our socks to make sure they were clean. We ended up with dozens of new cloth tarps by the end. The guy was one of the most miserable cocksuckers I've ever met in my life. He did have light carpet in a house that was probably pretty nice a few decades prior, but the carpet was badly stained and the house was in general disarray. You could tell his wife was scared to speak and kept giving us looks as if she was just waiting for the day this mother fudge keels over. I generally am pretty sympathetic, or at least pity people that I can see are suffering, as he clearly was just a miserable man, but nah. I've had thousands of customers over the years, and few are memorable, but fudge that guy in particular. If my boss at the time would have had any respect for himself or his employees, then he would have chose dignity instead of money on that one. Story 89. Actually going on right now, my friend thinks that all connective waves are damaging to your brain, so my phone has to be on airplane mode at all times. No, turning off data, location, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi is not enough. Apparently, even just having it connected to cell towers for calls and texts has basically the same level of radiation. He got me an Ethernet adapter for my phone to use the home internet LMAO. He claims he gets headaches if it's on, and asks me a couple times a day if my phone is on airplane mode or not. Answer, that's funny because turning a phone into airplane mode still means your phone is sending signals to the cell network to say your phone is not reachable right now. To not send out cellular signals would be to not have a mobile number phone. I'm guessing your mate's symptoms are psychosomatic at best or complete BSing at worst. Also, in some countries, your phone has to be constantly connected to the emergency mobile network as well. Story 90. No boys and girls in the pool at the same time. Friend found a great workaround. He turned out to be gay. Take that, crazy mom. Story 91. I love these posts because I'm so relieved that the worst any kid is going to encounter in my house is obnoxious dogs, cats, unfolded laundry everywhere, irreverent parenting, good food, and lots of dirty floors. Story 92. Don't sit on my friend's bed. We were very young, same gender, and no intimacy, anything to be worried about. Story 93. I'm left-handed, and in my country religion, it's considered sinful and bad. But this was years ago, and now no one really cares if someone is left-handed. I was 6 or 7 years old and was at my friend's house with another friend. Her mom calls us to the dinner table to eat lunch with the grandmother and her dad. So naturally, I start eating with my left hand. My parents never enforced the eat with your right hand rule. But then the grandmother loudly and angrily says she's left-handed, as if that's the worst thing possible, and looks at me with such dislike. And I'm only 7, so I got scared and nervous. My friends, parents bless them, tried to diffuse the situation by saying it's okay. She's a child, she'll grow out of it. I don't remember eating anything at her house ever again. Story 94. Not me, but knew some university students from Korea had a baffling time accepting the fact they have to be respectful to the non-Korean hosts. Story 95. Stayed a weekend with a friend when I was 19-20. I lived in a dorm, she with her parents, and they gave me her 11 p.m. curfew. Nope. Answer, my friend and I were on spring break in college and hanging out one night. We were both 21 or 22, and his parents knew he was with me. The night went late. We were just at my parents' house hanging out, and my friend headed home around 4 in the morning. He got to his house and found both his parents awake and furious with him. He was grounded for the rest of break. I didn't really like his parents before and still don't like them 20 years later. Story 96. About 7 years old, kid, in my class's mom required us to pee on the trees outside instead of using the bathroom. They said it was good for the trees. My mom saw me when she was pulling up to take me home and started yelling at me till the mom came out and said it was okay. My mom was very confused, and I don't think I went over to that house for a play date again. Story 97. One of my friends was banned from watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I never had a chance to test the rule. The only reason I know about it was because her father happened to mention it to my mother when I was nearby. He admitted that sometimes he'd catch my friend and her sister watching it, would laugh at the jokes, but then would recognize the show and order them to turn it off. He didn't give a reason for the ban, but since he's a wealthy white man with a beach house and a country club membership, it's a safe bet that racism was involved. Story 98. As adults, a friend has a rule to take off your shoes in her home. Okay, great. I keep my shoes off in my home too. But her floors were covered with pet hair. It was disgusting. Clean up your darn floors if you want people to take off their shoes. Story 99. There was a Gin Blossom song my friend and I weren't allowed to listen to because her father was a police officer. Hey, jealousy. Story 100. I needed permission to take my now ex-girlfriend out to the movies. I was 28 and she was 24 at the time. I told her that maybe she should stop letting her mother control her at this age. She agreed but did nothing to stop it. So I stopped the relationship. Story 101. At my friend's house, they had to drink 8 glasses of water a day, and they couldn't have any chips, pizza, or any junk food. When I would hang out with them, we would sometimes get pizza, but we had to throw it away at the pool or somewhere not close to their house so their dad wouldn't see. I always felt bad because at my house, my parents didn't really care what we ate. Story 102. My friend's family only flushed their toilets for 2, not 1. Also, his mom asked all of the boys to sit down when they had to pee. Needless to say, we didn't hang out at his house that often. Story 103. I had stayed at my parents' friend's house when I was around 7 or 8. IDK, I was a kid. Anyways, I turned on Nick and Ren and Stimpy was on. My mom's friend snatched my remote from my hand and exclaimed, "We don't watch this filth in this house," legit cried. It was OE of my favorites. She is still a total meanie. Story 104. Wasn't allowed to park foreign cars in the driveway. Surprisingly, this wasn't Detroit or anywhere close, but the family came from a long line of UAW workers. Story 105. I had a friend in school who lived with his evangelical Christian grandparents. He was only ever allowed to watch TV that was G-rated, even when he was 17 years old. Strangely enough, we would hang out more at my house than his. Story 106. This is back in 1990. My dad had moved to Louisiana a few years before, and my mom decided to ship me off from California to live with him. I was something of a problem child from the ages of 11 to 21. I was 30 in a new place and had no friends in a school where most of the people called me Hollywood or Surfer Boy. I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley, about 6 hours from LA, mostly farmers and meth heads. I was into anime, video games, writing stories, and baseball. Most of the kids there didn't really give a shoot about any of those things. But I eventually made one friend, ended up going over to his house to spend the night playing Final Fantasy and watching anime. About halfway through dinner, his dad broke the news that they were getting evicted from their house, and I had to help them pack since I was there. Rather than spend the night hanging out and playing games, we spent the night packing shoot up and cleaning from about 7 p.m. to 5 to 6 a.m. because apparently they had to be out the next day. Fairly sure the only reason his parents let me come over was to get the free labor. Needless to say, we didn't hang out much after that. TLDR made one friend when I moved to the South at 13 and got exploited for labor by his parents. Story 107. Wife and children were not allowed to eat until the dad was finished with his meal. Whatever was left over after he was full could be divided between everyone else. He was an obese, lazy piece of shoot, and it made him so smug that his world was set up that way. Still infuriates me to think about it. Story 108. Reading all of these parents with freaky rules just confirms that when I have kids, I want them and their friends to feel comfortable coming to our house to hang out whenever they want, in a space they can be themselves in. Story 109. Childhood best? Friend's mom was an alcho, and she was a very hard lady to argue with. Came home after our senior year formal, prom, and she literally forced us two 16-year-old girls to have a fully naked bath together. Nothing intimacy, just very awkward. Story 110. Their living room right where you walk in is where my friend's parents sit when they have company. No one is allowed to sit on the furniture unless guests are over. I know this because my friend's mom extended that rule to my sister and I. Story 111. This was in high school. I went with my friend to a mutual friend's house and stayed over for dinner. We had Chinese food and were given glasses of milk. Normally, both my friend and I don't drink milk with something savory like this, so we were confused. We asked for glasses of water, but they refused, stating children should drink milk. The parents did drink water, however, which put us off that we were denied water. Later, after we were done eating, I washed my hands and reached for a paper towel. I was immediately scolded and was told to use a grimy communal towel near the floor to dry my hands and not to waste the paper towel sheet. I understand conserving, but I felt like that was very strange. However, still, when I am at other people's houses, I am still apprehensive in using their paper towels because of the incident. Story 112. PS4 had just released. Coworker buys One Day One, invites me and another buddy to check out Battlefield 4 running on PS4. We get to his place, still lives with his parents, whatever. His dad is waiting for us by the door, and the first thing he says is, "No gay shoot happening in this house, okay?" We sort of laugh, thinking it's a joke. Dad still looks serious as all hell, and our buddy is looking down. Okay, Dad goes back in, and we ask our buddy, WTF was that? I used to be gay and did some stuff. Biggest WTF. How's that even work? How are you gay one day and not so gay the next? We awkwardly play Battlefield 4, then leave. Per house rules, didn't do any gay shoot. Story 113. No soda with pizza. We had to have milk. I was a really respectful kid, but even I was like, this meanie is a Nazi. Story 114. When I was a kid and visited my uncle on my dad's side, his second wife, who I still couldn't acknowledge as my new aunt, had this strange rule about asking if you could be excused from the table after eating dinner. My family were not accustomed to that at all, especially as this new aunt heaped extra rules on top, such as you weren't allowed to drink during your meal, only after you had finished it, you couldn't have your elbows on the table, and if you wanted seconds, you had to finish your plate completely and wait until other family members had finished their plates too. Needless to say, we didn't go to visit them much after that. Story 115. Not sure if this one counts, but whenever we stay with my fiance's parents, they make us stay in separate rooms, even though they know that we live together. I guess I get it because it's their house and their rules, but it's definitely annoying to deal with. Story 116. Friend's parents had a TV, but we weren't allowed to watch it because we love Jesus. I'm still not sure whether there was some other reason, and they were just bullshitting a 6-year-old because they didn't want to explain it, or they really were that crazy. Story 117. Not really a rule, but it's very much in my memory. In the house of a childhood friend of mine, there was always lots of small toys or child gadgets around, like just laying everywhere. Whenever me or some other friend would touch it, the mom would say, "Us that, your ass." Like it scared the fudge out of me. Calm TF down and clean the house if you don't want kids playing with the stuff you have laying around. Story 118. I'm from Japan. Everybody must eat something for dinner. Even if you don't like what was made, you still had to eat it. You must finish your plate. The family was American. I said no, it's rude because it tells the cook you weren't satisfied with your meal and you didn't like the meal. It's custom in Japan to not finish your plate. Story 119. Was scolded for drinking the milk from a bowl of cereal. Finished the cereal, started drinking the milk, and his mom walked in and took the bowl out of my hands and poured it down the sink, saying it's disrespectful to do that. Friend finished his cereal and just poured the milk down the sink. Like WTF kind of stupid jerk rule is that? Story 120. No flushing of toilets. His parents were environmentalists and wouldn't allow us to waste the water until several people used it. Who wants to poop in a piss-filled toilet? So gross. Story 121. A friend of mine is a married man. His wife does not allow any guests to enter their apartment. Each time I visit my friend, we were sitting outside their flat on the stairs. The wife would bring cafeteria snacks to the stairs, then go back to the apartment. Story 122. I had these friends that come from a hyper-religious family. One of their rules was When the parents compliment the kids, they can't say thank you. Instead, they say, "To God be the glory." Imagine my shock when the mom complimented my smarts and berated me for thanking her for the compliment. Story 123. Not me, but my BL had to go to the house of an albino kid that had a bald spot. Not sure what disorder he had. They were about 10. The kid's mom made him go to the bathroom with her son, like had to watch the kid poop. Story 124. Reading through all of these, I am once more reminded that a lot of people just have no business being parents. Story 125. My best friend throughout high school had a super controlling father. We couldn't eat at certain times, especially after dinner, unless it was a pre-bought snack. We had to be deathly quiet when he took his daily naps. She had to make, and being him, chocolate milk when she got home, and so did her mother. He would wake up ungodly early on weekends to blast music and play drums. He would come into her room and just rant. Very strange man. Story 126. Not necessarily a rule, but I once went to a friend's house, had pizza for lunch, and they put ketchup on it. I have no idea why they think that's normal. It's not like they offered it, they put it on assuming I'd be okay with ketchupy pizza. Story 127. When we were playing Digimon Tamagotchi, we were not allowed to say evolution because apparently it's a rude word. We need to say makeup as in Sailor Moon's Moon Prism Power Makeup. Story 128. Wasn't a rule exactly, but I got reprimanded for using the word flaccid at the dinner table at a friend's house when we were in the 5th grade. Her dad was quite upset. Story 129. Stayed with a friend for a few weeks while I was in town for work. He unplugged everything in the house when not in use, his wife's rule. I got an angry text in the morning because I had accidentally left the toaster plugged in. Story 130. Oh, wow, where should I start? Okay, being an Asian kid with Asian parents, there were lots of rules in the house. First and foremost, no shoes in the house, which is understandable. However, despite my mom and dad vacuuming and mopping the floor daily, and sometimes twice a day, the floor is filthy. You cannot sit on the floor, lay on the floor, touch the floor with your hands, let alone eating any food off the floor. So 4-year-old me, Gore, really curious. I want to know what laying on the floor feels like. So I decided to, while my dad and moms were in their room, lay on the cold floor on a hot summer day. My dad came out of the room and saw me laying down on the floor. He got so mad, I swear steam was coming out of his head. He was speechless and pointed his finger at me with rage. I got so scared, I jumped up immediately. I think he realized that he was getting so worked up for no reason, so he just turned around and walked back to his room. That may have been the luckiest day of my life, lol. And now me and my partner eats dinner and watch movies on the floor daily despite having the comfiest couch on planet Earth. Take that, mom and dad. Another rule I remember is that any crumbs that come out of an eraser has to be immediately put into this paper tray that my mom fashioned out of some scrap paper. If she sees any eraser crumbs on the table while I'm doing homework, I'm dead. Without turning my comment into a formal complaint, I think I should stop here. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.